looking at live pictures from Downing Street this morning, where the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is about to leave Number 11 to deliver her spending review in the House of Commons. It is, of course, a hugely significant day because we'll find out what the government's priorities are for the next few years, how much each Whitehall department has to spend on areas including the NHS, schools, policing and transport. There's already been a flurry of announcements in the last few days. £39 billion for affordable housing, for example. Rachel Reeves and her team have been working hard on all of this. These are pictures of them preparing for all of this in the last few days. There have been some maybe quite tetchy conversations with cabinet ministers about exactly what they are going to get. The Chancellor has, of course, set herself some rules on how much she can borrow, and that means day-to-day spending will be tight for some departments. Now, I will be talking about all of this with our economics editor, Faisal Islam, and political editor, Chris Mason, and we'll be getting reaction from all of the main political parties throughout all of this programme today. Jim Connolly is also going to be in Leeds, and he will be getting reaction from people there to everything that has been going on. So as we wait for the Chancellor to appear, it is worth pointing out that this isn't a budget. So it's not about taxes, it's not about the pint of beer, and Rachel Reeves will not be posing on that famous doorstep with the red budget box, but instead her folder will contain the details of how she's going to allocate around £600 billion worth of spending a year. And Chris, as we wait for Rachel Reeves to appear here, I mean, this is a really significant moment, isn't it? Not just for the government and their priorities, but also for her personally.
For her personally, for the government's priorities and for how the country feels, really. You know, this is the allocation of a huge amount of money over a significant period, pretty much between now and the general election. Some of it day-to-day spending in public services, some of it the longer-term stuff, so-called capital spending. We've been hearing a lot about that from the Chancellor in the last couple of days. And a sense of how the public realm feels, and then in a more big P political sense, a judgment over time from people as to the extent to which this government is able to make a difference that people can feel.
How much pressure is she under personally, do you think?
I think quite a lot of pressure, really. So she will make the case that the inheritance was difficult. Her critics will make the case that she's made that inheritance more difficult. Speaking to people privately within Labour, there's an acknowledgement of the missteps that they've made, but also the scale of what they were taking on. And what they've been doing with this spending review is what they've called a zero-based review. So they've spent the last couple of months going through line by line of pretty much every line of government spending, asking the question, do we still need to do this anymore? This then sets out where their priorities are. So priorities in numbers as opposed to just priorities in words, and then also getting to the point, and they're really aware of this in government, and I hear this from Labour backbenchers too, of wanting to point to things that they are delivering, that it perhaps takes time to get your feet under the table in government, to decide what you want to prioritise, to look at the books. This is the point where we see where that money is being allocated and a sense of ultimately what this government's all about.
Faisal, we'll come to the all-important graphs of how much she's got to spend in just a minute, but I'd also like to introduce for this part of the programme, I'm joined by the Labour MP Lola McAvoy and the Conservative MP Rebecca Smith. And Lola, what are your priorities as a Labour MP? What do you want to hear today?
So this is a big day for the government and for new MPs like me. I think there's quite a lot of excitement in Westminster, certainly on the government side. I would like to see lots of prioritising of security. So that's economic security. I want to see us sticking to the fiscal rules, and I can't see those changing. There's been no briefing about that. But I want to see us continuing with this economic security mission and prioritising our place on the world stage in terms of global security, so defence spending, but also energy security, really, really important. We've seen the nuclear announcement that's come out. That's 10,000 jobs, and the supply chains in areas like mine in Darlington will be going wild for that because it's a green light for big businesses to get in behind. So that's going to be really good. And then I want to see skills. So the big thing about Darlington in my patch is that we've got lots of people who have a core understanding of what hard graft and industrial jobs mean, but the opportunities just aren't there for the next generation coming up. And so we've got a bit of a wage ceiling. So we need to see a big skills investment. That's what I would like to see. And then finally, I would really like to see mental health services prioritised in some form. So spending for the NHS, but I want to see that mental health.
They're the areas where there might be some money to spend, but there are going to be cuts to some departments, aren't there? We know that. We know that cabinet ministers have been wrangling over all of this. How worried are you about that?
So we don't know that there's going to be cuts to departments until that book is published when Rachel Reeves sits down.
Well, we do, because she's prioritised defence and health, which means there won't be enough.
But we haven't seen the figures until she sits down. But what I would say is this is a restructure of how the economy works and how the state works, OK? Ultimately, a lot of public services that people have been interacting with over the last 14 years have got worse and worse and worse, and that has been universal across Darlington, that every door I knock on, someone's got a different tale about a different service that they expected to work and hasn't been working. So we do need to do things differently. I think there's been some talk about investing in the digital economy and how we make our state digital. That is going to have a big knock-on effect for productivity in the public sector. And when I say productivity, I also mean efficiency. You know, going for a blood test, not having to do it twice because you got it done at a different area. You know, these things just aren't working, and the state is so the normal day-to-day functions are broken, and I think people can't rely on the services they used to. So we do need a restructure, and any new boss would do that.
Rebecca, some people do feel that lots of things are broken, and a lot of them do blame the previous Conservative government. Is it time to sort this stuff out?
Well, I mean, the Chancellor, Shadow Chancellor last week said that we won't make the same mistakes we've done in the past, and that they're now saying, or we're saying, that what's important for us is fiscal responsibility, and we want to ensure that that is secure by not increasing taxes in the way that we're worried that the Labour government are going to do. I mean, ultimately, since Labour came into power, it's been utter chaos from an economic perspective. We've seen inflation increase, unemployment's increasing, growth is stagnating. We're not seeing the thriving economy that they promised us when they came into power, and ultimately, for them to deliver those manifesto commitments is going to cost them a lot of money. And we've already seen that the people that they target are hard-working families, it's farmers, it's pensioners, it's all the people who want to use those services, but are ultimately the ones that have just been picked off as the easy wins, and the ones that, in the Labour government's eyes, don't seem to matter as much as everybody else.
But do you think that it costs money to improve these things? And if so, where would you get that money from?
Well, it ultimately does cost money, but the Labour government have done that through higher spending on public services through salaries. And we saw the £9 billion chunk of money that was put in to increase public sector salaries.
So you wouldn't have paid the junior doctors, and they could well be still on strike?
Well, none of that. Well, they're threatening strike still. So
Here comes Rachel Reeves walking out of number 11 Downing Street. So no red box, because this is not a budget, it is a spending review. She does seem to have a red folder with her there, which will have all the details of what she's about to announce. And what she's about to announce is the spending that government departments will get for the next 3 years. She will also talk about the investment. She talks about investment, about the projects she wants to fund over the next 4 years. She is heading just across the road to the House of Commons, and just to explain what's going to happen today, there will be Prime Minister's questions as usual, and that will happen at 12 o'clock, where we will see Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer go head-to-head. And then straight after that, Rachel Reeves will lay out all of that. We think she will speak for maybe around 45 minutes, and then we get a reaction, of course, from all the other parties. And as I said earlier, I'm joined by Faisal Islam, our economics editor. It's a big, significant task. It's been quite a long time since there's been one of these that hasn't been a budget, if you like. In terms of the money that she's got to play with, how much has she got?
Yeah, she didn't brandish the document. She hid it inside a file. I don't know if there's any significance to that, but let's see. She's trying to hide the colour of the book, which is obviously a nerd thing. There is a big picture here, actually, which is, I think this is actually a golden opportunity a year into the government. There are obviously different figures going in different directions, but the growth figures in the Q1 were the highest in the G7. So you've got a little bit of win there. They've signed these trade deals to try and make a case with long-term plans that they have a vision for growth, not just for the public, not just for their backbenchers, but also for foreign investors that are really important, for example, infrastructure. 3 years plans on public spending, 4 years plans on capital and further into the future. These things are really important. But the fundamental choices, the sort of headline choices, which may, I have to say, warn people, so it might take a bit of time for us to unpick this. We're going to get lots of very large
We're relying
numbers.
on you for that, Faisal.
No, I'll try and do it in
I'm
real
sure Chris
time.
can do it as well.
The internal AI up here will try and do that. But like, let's look at charts. Come on, let's bring a chart.
Okay, come on, let's have a chart.
Embarrassing.
Go on.
Right. So the first chart. Now this is about, if you like, the big sort of macro choice that we're waiting for. That's in that red file about whether to prioritise health and the knock-on impact on unprotected budgets overall. The blue bar there, 1.2%, that has already been set at the spring statement and budget. So that is the overall level of departmental spending.
So it is going up over that period. It's going to go up by 1.2%.
Now, if we take the typical pattern of how they have helped health even more at these sorts of events in the past, we should be getting above 3%, something like the green box. The consequences of that, because health is just such a big portion of departmental spending, is that the unprotected budgets, so things that have been under pressure, visibly so for our viewers, that have been courts and prisons and the like, they would then face a real-term cut. No, sorry, this is an exercise helped by the IFS's numbers and others. Now, another number, if we go on to the next slide, that we've heard sort of briefed is, in fact, it'll be slightly less than that, the health settlement.
So health will get less than it has recently.
Previously, but still above inflation, but in terms of the health demands and everything. And that leaves the other budgets roughly flat, small cut, and depends how they divvy that up. Now, I mentioned a word there, demands, right? So here's the thing. It's very, very interesting to talk about, have public services been, have they had enough cash? But actually, has the expectation of people and the users of those public service voters, has the expectation gone up? Are these budgets now being used for things after the pandemic that we didn't really think they were going to be used for? This is, I think, what this next chart is what the Chancellor will want to talk about the most, which is about this investing in the future.
This is the money that she's got. So day-to-day spending is that goes on things like salaries for nurses.
It goes on hugely on salaries,
and then a lot of other things. This is capital spending. So this is projects like roads. Nuclear power stations.
Yeah, and the Society of Economic Nerds would tell you, spend your money on this because this is what helps your growth. And indeed, if you look at the investment record of the UK, not just in terms of public but also private investment, we've had a very poor record. No surprise then that our growth and productivity has been low. So she would say she's trying to deal with a problem here, that we've had low investment. Actually, if you look at the 5 years... So this shows the cumulative extra capital over and above the plans inherited from Jeremy Hunt.
So these were Jeremy Hunt's plans, the blue line, what he would have done.
Very clear icons. You're looking like quite a bump in capital spending. There's a number going around that's £113 billion more. They're also comparing it to the sort of New Labour era. And if you average over 5 years, which I think is it's a kind of relevant thing to do when you talk about capital, because people want to know that the money's there for the long term, then these numbers, I think, are the highest 5-year average, highest half-decade average since 1981. So this is the stuff that always gets cut when you've got a tight budget. So this is where we go back to last October, where she changed the fiscal rules a little bit. And this created space to do this, which is why you're going to hear a lot about these sorts of projects.
But people will be watching this and going, hang on a minute, I thought you said there was no money.
Yeah.
And yet here she is, and she's spending over £100 billion.
Yes, she's spending.
Is she borrowing that?
Yes, basically, yes. So she's created space to borrow to invest. Famously, Gordon Brown called this the golden rule. In general terms, like the IMF and the OECD say that if you're going to borrow money, do it to invest. You get the return. Now, that doesn't mean if you spend, are you going to spend that money wisely? We've seen the example of what's happened with HS2. There's still a review going on in that. They're going to have to put some sort of interim line item about HS2 into today's spending review because the numbers, they don't even know what the numbers are. They're not even in 20, 25 years. There's all these sorts of sub-stories here that are extremely interesting and line items that I'll be watching very, very, very carefully.
It's like that caveat you get in the adverts, isn't it? Investments can go down as well as up. But the argument that they make is that this is about the sort of long-term regeneration of the public realm, and that is outwardly, they argue, a good thing, and then also potentially an economic multiplier as well. But in political terms, the challenge, even for those MPs I speak to who say, great, they're up for this, it's by its definition, it is long term.
Yeah.
And you know the nature.
Will
of
they
where we
reap the
are.
rewards?
Well, exactly.
Could it
to
be
whom do the political
another
rewards fall? And we're in this era of political volatility, where there's a desire from so many in the electorate because of how things have been economically since the financial crisis. Of where's the beef? Where's the improvement? We need it. We need to feel it now. And that's the horns of the politics of this.
Just a really quick point is actually, though, for example, the foreign investors that might pile in and help fund a railway line and think they can make stable returns over 20, 30, 40 years from that. What I do hear this from them, you know, this is a Labour government that got a massive majority. Like, we kind of want to see them, like, definitively say they're going to do all this stuff and not row back. And, for example, on green energy, are they sort of there in Downing Street thinking, I'm a little bit scared of reform and a backlash?
Because they were going
net
to do
zero.
it, and then they actually took back some of the funding and decided not
yeah,
to.
well, there is that, but also just the general vibe of the government. Are they strong enough? Do they actually realise they've got a massive majority and they can kind of do what they want for 3 or 4 years, right? Do they act like that? Do they give off that sort of, you know, presence? Because if they are, then I believe that they won't fold immediately on something like, I know, something obscure like regulations over heat pumps or something like that. And I'll build my massive heat pump factory in an important area that wants
So
jobs.
investors, they want stability.
They want stability, but I think the demeanour of the government really matters. Like, and so maybe little things like U-turns here and there, you start to question. So they have the majority, and almost what I heard a year ago was that they were sort of saying, we've got this big majority, we can face the pain. I guess that's the point. Almost, you know, Tony Blair famously said 10 or 15 years ago, if you're not doing really badly in the polls in the first year, then you're doing something wrong, because you've got to do the painful stuff that yields rewards in the future. Is that the dynamic we're going to see today? That's the question. I don't know the answer to that question. That's why I'm excited.
You are excited, which is great. Which is great. Just one thing: is there a concern about the amount of borrowing? Because the borrowing costs for the government, they have gone up, haven't they?
They have gone up, and if you like. So there was an alternative path, you know, I don't know, I think maybe, you know, Elon Musk and Doge and Reform say that they want to do some of this stuff, but it's not entirely clear. You know, you could have slashed the state and got debt down, and maybe that would have put us in a different bucket. And, you know, now the old debt-stricken countries like Spain and Greece even, they have the low borrowing costs. Our borrowing costs have gone up. Some of that is a global thing to do with the tariffs and the US. There's a UK factor there. I think what's really interesting from the opposition point of view is every time it goes up, it goes with text messages and emails saying, oh, look, it's worse than this trust, come on, what's going on? It's just like the mini budget. Now, I hate to say to them that at the same time that happened, the pound fell not just a lot, but to the lowest level during the mini budget.
I remember
Since
sitting here with you as
Hamilton invented the dollar, right?
You watched it tumble.
The pound at the minute is at like 134 or something like that, right, against the dollar. So there is a question mark about UK's fiscal plans and general sort of growth. It's kind of more about growth here. But you know, if there are more U-turns, you know, maybe that arched eyebrow gets bigger. But it's not like a mini budget situation. And if you plant your flag on that mast, you know, then you may find that just doesn't happen. Yeah.
Now, all importantly, of course, what do businesses, voters, what are they going to make of all of this? What do they want to hear? Jim Connolly is in Leeds to help us find out.
Yeah, Vicky, I'm at an old fire station turned community centre. Interestingly, this community centre has 6 charities based out of it, which probably tells you something about the nature of the area. People around here do struggle socially and economically. And we've got a couple of people here from the local community who are going to have a quick chat with us, and then we've got a panel of guests inside to have a bigger chat about the wider issues. So, we've got Norm. Norm, tell me, what do you want today from the government?
I want to make sure that my daughter gets a good pension when I die.
So you're not watching for yourself, you're watching with a view for your daughter?
All I'm bothered about is my daughter. My daughter was born with a condition called homocystinuria. We were told when she was born by the doctors there was no cure for it. And she's in her 50s now and there's still no cure for it. But I'm not bothered because I'm going to leave a decent amount of money. I left everything to my daughter, the house, everything in it. And she won't get my pension. But as long as she has enough money to live on, quite happily as well, I don't want her to be struggling. And if that could happen, I'd be delighted.
So, you've just come up for a cup of coffee this morning.
Yep.
And interrupted it rudely, but tell me, you've literally just come up this morning from your house. What is it that you want from the government today? What do you want them to be talking about?
Oh God, I don't know.
You were saying housing's a big issue for you.
Yeah, housing, and hospitals. They don't get enough money for God, I don't know.
That's right. So both of you clearly want some investment in the NHS. That's obviously massively important to you.
That's right, it is indeed, yes. The only person I am concerned about is my daughter. If I know that she's going to be looked after by the state, I'd be quite happy. I've left everything that I have, all the money that I have, and the house, everything goes to my daughter. I talked it over with my son, and the first words he said was, "Don't leave me anything, Dad. Leave everything to Angela." And so all I want to know from the government is, are they going to give a reasonable amount of money? And if they can do that, I'll be quite happy.
Norm, it's been lovely chatting to you this morning. We're going to head inside now to speak to a couple of the charities based in here and a few people who've got some big ideas about what the north of England needs. We're going to start on this table here with some people who work in the charity sector. We've got Pip and Raheem. Pip, tell us, what does your charity do and what do you want from the government?
So I work for Forum Central. We bring the voice of the health and care third sector into our city conversations, and I'm also the chair of the trustees here at the fire station, which is a fantastic place, as you'll have seen.
And what do you want the government to be talking about today? What are the big announcements that mean something to you and the people in your charity sector?
I think the social housing investment is really good because it will help unblock the system and create opportunities for partnership, but it will take time for that build. So what we need as well is things like the NHS funding to really invest and shift money to communities, to frontline places and spaces where people can have the opportunities for employment, for building their own health and resilience, and for connecting with each other. That's what keeps people healthy and well and builds that brilliant economy and contribution to the world that charities and people from our communities can make.
Raheem, introduce yourself for us. What's your charity do?
So we're a charity based across Leeds and we support a lot of the communities around health and health inequalities.
We've got announcements around investment in the NHS today, and some of these figures are big figures. They're big, kind of the big pot we're talking about. But actually, on the ground, as that money filters down, what is it you need from the government?
Just like my colleague Pip said, it's more around collaborative funding really and making sure we're working together to support those that actually really need it and usually are furthest away from treatment as well.
Do you worry that sometimes these big announcements down at places like Westminster, 200 miles away, can feel quite distant and take a long time to filter down to people like you?
It does. It takes a while for us to understand actually how that impacts us as a communities. But I think it's really important is continuing the conversations with those that are in power and in place to make sure we're doing that work together as well.
And I think as Hamara, involved, we've got a really strong bedrock of existing relationships with Leeds City Council and with health. We're really trying to work through these challenges together as a system. Things like child-friendly Leeds and things that are recognising the health inequalities and the huge challenges that some communities like this in Gipton face require us to work with housing and education, all of these different areas together. And because we've got those existing relationships, we're better placed when these announcements come down. But we do need the funding to flow better to places where it brings such incredible value.
Pip, Raheem, I'll come back to you later when you've had a chance to watch what the Chancellor's saying. We're going to head now to another table where we've got another couple of guests to speak to. We've got Hugh and Tom. Hugh, hello there. Introduce yourself.
So I'm Henry Murison from the Northern Powerhouse Partnership.
And what do you want from the government today? You're, I suppose, the big vision person here. You're talking about what the north of England needs at a very broad level.
So what we need is to better connect the northern cities. And that means with transport, because at the moment it's just too difficult to get from here even to Bradford, never mind to Manchester Airport or Liverpool. And alongside transport, we need to think about those other drivers of productivity. So we know on net zero and on innovation, if we spent more money here in the north of England, that wouldn't just have sort of the benefits you'd expect. If you did that along with transport all at the same time, you'd get something greater than the sum of its parts. So you get more productivity growth than you would from just investing in one city.
Henry, I called you here a minute ago. I'm really sorry about that. We'll come back to you for further comment in a second. Tom, introduce yourself. and tell me a little bit about what you want from the government today.
So I'm Tom Forth, I'm a founder and the CTO of the Data City. We're a 30-person fast-growing tech company here in Leeds. I mean, the key thing for us, the number one ask for loads and loads of people in Leeds is we want a tram. We hope a tram gets built. It's been announced about 50 times. We just want to see that there's no cuts to the type of investment that would get proper infrastructure connecting up our city. And for me, that's quite selfish. I want the people who work for me to be able to get to work.
So some real clear, real-life demands, I suppose, from the government here in Leeds. And all eyes now are going to be on the Chancellor to see what she does announce.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for getting those views. And Lola, if I come to you, you could hear Tom's frustration there. The tram, it's been announced loads of times, hasn't happened. The government has talked about getting more investment and projects done outside of London and the South East. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. It's essential because talent isn't regionalised, but opportunities are. And what we're seeing in places like Manchester, where they've had a decade of really fantastic mayor, is that where they've got their transport stations, those areas are developing growth in small communities because people can get to work, they go back to work to their affordable house where they can then spend in their local economies. But it's the transport is the absolute lifeblood of growth in our regions. And I think when you're listening to what people are saying, obviously the big infrastructure spend is essential. And I know earlier, we heard that it takes time for people to feel the benefit of that. So it does take time, but you will see a very quick reaction in jobs because these things have got to be built. So when you're looking at supply chains, a lot of which are based in my constituency, we've got good manufacturing and lots of SMEs. They are going to benefit from these big announcements because they're going to start welding and building and the scaffolding's going to start going up and it's going to be brilliant. So that means that we're seeing more jobs for working people and they're well-paid jobs. I think it's also important to notice about procurement that this government's hell-bent on, and it might come up in this statement today, but it might not. But it's about restructuring how we spend public money. So it's not just about the top-line figure, which will be focused on today, but we need to spend it to make sure that it goes into our SMEs because they employ local people and they have good terms and conditions. So we're going to try and get more of a slice of a pie for our SMEs in towns like Darlington as well.
Rebecca, you heard some of the frustration there from Leeds. I mean, previous Conservative governments talked about levelling up. There's lots of communities who feel that that just didn't happen.
Well, I mean, I think everything that gets talked about has been on all the headlines this morning is about the North and the Midlands. Well, I represent a constituency in Devon that was going to benefit considerably under the last government, and I haven't heard anything yet that would be suggesting that there's the chunks of money that regions like the South West, and by the South West I don't mean Bristol, I mean the far South West, I mean Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Dorset, which are thriving for SMEs, and we've heard some announcements around defence procurement. But this is over the next 4 years. And, Lola talks about the importance of procurement, but she also talked about skills. And ultimately, all of that is going to take time. So I'm not convinced that there's going to be a huge amount in this for the next 4 years for the South West, unless they are prepared to invest in things like transport infrastructure. So, we were going to make sure that there were local railway lines that linked up the cities, Plymouth to Tavistock, for example. But we were also, let me finish, we were also, we also had the money committed to for the Dawlish railway line. At the end of the day, if Dawlish fails, which is, for those of your viewers who don't know where Dawlish is, it's a beautiful stretch of the railway line in Devon. I highly recommend it. But, 10 years ago, all the trains in and out of the north and the southeast got cancelled. If we don't get that kind of investment, we're not going to see success. And, at the end of the day, the government or the Labour Party can say you didn't succeed. It's the government, it's the Labour government now. And if they aren't making those decisions today that impact the regions, who cares what the past was? We've got to talk about what's going forward.
Well, Chris, they have made some of those announcements, haven't they? And they are saying they're going to do it. But you heard from the people in Leeds there. Are they going to be satisfied? Will it be quick enough?
Well, that's going to be a big kind of political judgment after all of this. I think what will be interesting to see the detail of, and the Chancellor's talked about a bit of this, and it sounds quite nerdy this, but it really matters, is the Green Book. So this is this set of rules that the Treasury has where they appraise the value of public money. And you might think, too right, they should do too. But if the conclusion of this government is that in the past, there's been too direct a read across between, OK, we put this pot of money into this project and it'll generate X. And if we do it down the road, it'll only generate Y. And the view of ministers is that that has skewed over a generation a disproportionate amount of money as they see it going into London and the South East because it's the most economically productive part of the UK. Therefore, so the argument goes, extending a sense of the rest of the UK being left behind. Now, we heard the Chancellor last week when she was in Rochdale, in Greater Manchester, and then in Birmingham, saying that they're rewriting that. Looking at the formula, and this again, as I say, is quite nerdy, but it matters, looking at how that is rewritten and the extent to which that then drives investment, whether it be in the southwest of England or the northeast of England or indeed anywhere else, is going to be really key. When you have a critique made by the likes of Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, you'd hear it from Ben Houchen in the Tees Valley and others, saying that we are a very, very centralised country with a huge amount of focus on London and the South East, and how do you try and break that without it being to the detriment of London? And we've heard some briefings suggesting that Sir Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, is as a result not that happy.
It is fascinating, actually, if you take a step back about what that equation has done. It's almost like, but it's what you might call the Treasury mindset, is that where the growth is where you invest. So there's more growth there, so you invest more, and it becomes this...
And there's an outward logic to that.
But there is a logic to it, but there's no surprise then that all of our viewers could see that the United Kingdom becomes incredibly centralised, and we have more tube lines. I forget the stat, Tom Forth will have it, but if you stretch out all the tube lines and you compare them to sort of our second, third, fourth, fifth, seventh, the equivalent city in Spain or Germany has got a metro line. So this is nerdy stuff, but it's really important in terms of the balance of the country. And if you have opportunities for young people at great universities in the north of England, in the West Country as well, to sort of stay and create job markets there. I think it's very interesting, this thing about the London Mayor, Sir Sadiq Khan, saying, well, he hasn't said anything yet, but we get the sense that they're unhappy. You almost think, though, if you're the government, you kind of want that.
That's exactly what someone whispered to me the other night.
Oh, is it? You do want that?
If there was a little bit of pushback, as you'd expect from a mayor who's going to argue the corner for the city that they represent, that would represent a sense of success in terms of saying that they had shifted the balance sufficiently, that there were squeals from their own side about... perhaps London not getting as much as the mayor would want to see.
But you take something like Crossrail, I think it's the same length of what Liverpool-Manchester would be. And so, these are long-term projects. We're waiting to see whether we get some sort of, green light, even for the sort of crayons on the map stage of the Liverpool to Manchester line.
I feel like it's been talked about for a long time.
All of these arguments have been talked about. We've been doing this job for 10, 20 years, and some of these arguments about procurement, it's the same old... anyway. Don't get me started.
It's the same old argument, but it's a new government that's going to deliver it. So, you're doing my job for me.
Last Labour government.
Let's have a quick look inside the chamber, because the House of Commons is, of course, sitting and filling up before Prime Minister's questions, which probably takes a little bit of a backseat today. It's going to start in just over 10 minutes' time. And then straight after that, Rachel Reeves will stand up and make a pretty lengthy statement, followed then by the opposition, by the Conservatives, and then some of the other parties. Now, ahead of Rachel Reeves speaking, there have been several announcements, several things that have already been put in the public domain. And I think, as we were talking about there, the investment side of all of this is something she is going to want to dwell on, I suppose, not surprisingly, given this is where she is going to be spending an awful lot of money. So if we take a look at this, £39 billion has been announced already for affordable and social housing. 2.5% of GDP economic output will go on defence. That's by 2027-28. An awful lot of demands on the defence budget, given what's been going on in Ukraine. £86 billion for science and technology. And as we were talking about, £15 billion for transport outside of London. Just over £14 billion for Sizewell C, for the nuclear plant there. The Education Secretary has previously announced free school meals for 500,000 more children, £750 million for the new Edinburgh supercomputer, and £187 million for AI and digital skills, and £250 million for the nuclear fleet at Faslane. So an awful lot there that has already been announced. Now, look, Chris, I guess it's not surprising she's going to want to talk about that a lot, but there are going to be some difficult decisions for some government departments. And the way this works is that the Treasury has pretty much been in negotiations with cabinet ministers over what they're going to get. And there's been a bit of tension, should we say.
Yeah, there has, and perhaps inevitably, because of course as a cabinet minister or a department, you're going to fight the corner for your department, and of course as a treasurer, you're going to be thinking, do you really need such and such for such and such? Can we not get rid of that? On a human level, what I've been struck by speaking to ministers is that it's not that long ago that the guys in government now were in opposition, and so therefore a much tighter team. And then suddenly they're in government departments and there's formal processes around all of this. So there's sort of emailed submissions that involve civil servants. Then it comes back and it's this person who you've known for 20 years who's down the road in the Treasury who you're then in a wrangle with. There's lots of talk and indeed cliches around all of this about, behind closed doors and furious rows and all of that. Some of it's considerably sort of more prosaic. It's sort of, I've got an email about line whatever of the budget. Oh, that's signed off, but what does that mean for the budget down here and all of that kind of stuff. The Home Office, I've heard more than once, it's been a real old wrangle.
Yvette Cooper was the last one to
indeed
agree, and she's a previous Chief Secretary to the Treasury,
so
she's been on the other side
to sit in Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary, the Chancellor's Deputy's seat. And the argument, I've heard from the Home Office, and of course they would make this argument, as would any other Office of State or Department of State. They argue, look, we do some pretty gritty and pretty important stuff, but they're not protected in the way that defence and health are. And there has been a real old wrangle with quite a lot of public argument too. So we saw Sir Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, and some other senior police figures very publicly talk about, as they saw it, the threat to their budgets or the consequences if they felt too much of a squeeze. So yeah, this has been tough, but it's no coincidence that the pre-announced stuff over the last week or so, that list we were just looking at, is that longer-term investment stuff on the whole, which broadly speaking is easier for a Chancellor to announce and be sort of outwardly proud of and make a news story out of, etc., than some of the line-by-line, day-to-day stuff that is tighter. And that's the decision that she and the government have taken about where they want to prioritise.
When we looked at that first graph and it says that spending is going to go up by 1.2%, people will go, well, there we go, spending's going up, there's going to be more public spending. But in reality, in terms of some of these departments, will the public will they start to feel what will affect, they will be cuts?
It isn't just about the money that you spend. But obviously that has helped when periods where people see that public services may have increased. Clearly, I think it's quite important, like Westminster Village occasionally looks within itself.
Surely not.
There's revolutions going on in terms of technology and productivity that will materialise within this Parliament at the same time. I'm intrigued to know how they do this. We hear a lot about AI and we joke about it. Obviously, we don't use it in any of our scripts ever. But actually, the deployment of it in the public sector, whether you're in the NHS or teaching especially, it will totally transform everything. Now, whether that's going to save money or improve the public services, who's going to make that?
Does it need upfront investment?
Loads of upfront investment. It needs infrastructure. So that world is changing. Around the world, governments, big governments, successful governments, are becoming a bit more statist. They're directing their economies. Donald Trump, the home of the free traders and the free market, they're literally deciding, what to tariff. The world economy is changing. And the thing I really wonder is, we didn't quite get to a 3-year spending review, did we, in the last Parliament? But
well, it was done during COVID.
Well, yeah. So much changes so quickly, and you set out these rigid totals. Is this even the same spending review they would have had a year ago, given how much the world economy has changed in real time? How kind of flexible are they to respond to how the world changes?
Let's look at the big picture on the economy, if you like, one aspect of it. This headline in the Daily Mail, Rachel Reeves rocked by job slump. Shock figures show that 250,000 jobs have gone since her tax-raising budget. How much of a worry will this be? The national insurance rise is being blamed by lots of businesses, saying they're just not hiring anymore.
So I think there was a combination of the national insurance rise and the national living wage rise meant that the impact of this was very concentrated in specific industries. And I think if they had their time again, Rachel Reeves would have simply just reversed the employee national insurance cut that we got in the budget.
from
because
the
they did it
Conservatives.
this way,
that was the pre-election.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
which she said wasn't properly accounted for and all that sort of stuff. If they'd had that, they would have just done that. And in fact, she's given hints that that's what they actually wanted to do, but they made a pledge in the run-up to the election. Exactly.
I mean, that would have been
a year
an
ago.
absolute coach and horses through that manifesto.
No, but like, yeah, but they so
as opposed to a sort of light,
sort of, yeah, exactly.
the edges of it.
Exactly. But the net result of this is that you combine those two things together, and what might have happened is that the employer wages would have been squeezed in a way that they were helped. You can't do that if the national living wage is going up. So that is why, totally predictably, in areas of that type of wage, in retail and hospitality, you can see an impact. So you can see a sort of a flow through. The unemployment rate's 4.6%. It's still like within a range of where it's been over the past sort of 2 to 3 years. They will be concerned. There is a slight silver lining in that it makes a Bank of England interest rate cut a bit more likely. Step back, and I think they'll probably point to obviously cock a hoop about the Q1 GDP figures. That is just one quarter's figures.
The growth went up.
The growth went up 0.7%, which is factually...
But the forecasts have been...
Yeah, but so you know exactly. So you wouldn't bet the farm on one quarter's.
They do talk about it a lot, though.
And yet they have talked about it a lot, particularly as their justification for the about turn on the winter fuel payment, when. Seems the brutal political reality of that was they just realised it was screamingly unpopular and so changed their mind. Let's
just bring Lola in on the national insurance rise. I mean, you must have people in your constituency, businesses, who were it's really affected them and it's affected their ability to take people on.
So, the Chancellor said in the budget that she will not be repeating a budget like that. So it was absolutely
essential last autumn.
No. It was absolutely essential that we restructured the economy and that we brought in some money to fill the 22 billion black hole that everybody's heard about. Let me finish because I didn't interrupt you out of politeness. So £40 billion was raised from that. That has then gone directly into day-to-day spending that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. The fiscal rules are essential because what it means is, as Faisal said, global investment will come in off the back of a secure economy. We have an opportunity on the global stage to restructure our economy to prioritise defence, and our energy security and infrastructure is essential. But on the day-to-day spending, the national insurance rise specifically, what I've heard from businesses is that whilst it was difficult for them, they are optimistic and relieved at the long-term plan that this government has. So when I spoke to one business in Darlington who said to me, rolled his eyes and said, oh, come on, you know, we're having a hard time anyway. And I said, yeah, but here are all the other things we're doing for your industry. They absolutely lapped it up and they are relieved. Businesses are breathing a sigh of relief about investment and growth in their industries, and that's about prioritising British business.
Rebecca?
Well, I have to completely disagree with what is obviously going on in Darlington, because in southwest Devon, that is not what I'm hearing. And I think it's worth pointing out that it is hospitality and the kind of tourism sector that you've described. I went to a fish and chip shop the other day, and I think the thing we've got to remember is it's not just the national insurance increases, it's not just the minimum wage increases, it's the costs that are increasing. So a piece of fish is now more expensive for this fish and chip shop to buy, but the customer doesn't want to pay more money. And on National Fish and Chip Day on Friday, people were still complaining about the cost of a portion of fish and chips, but they don't necessarily recognise that the government's decision to increase national insurance for employers and to increase the national minimum wage has caused that. But the other bit that concerns me that we haven't covered at all today is the impact on education. So I've just had letters from a school in my constituency where they're having to restructure, and the trust has sent through staggering figures of the cost of national insurance on teachers that has not been fully funded by the government, and the impact that that has on class sizes, on how they're going to teach their children, and particularly in rural communities. And again, in the southwest, where the investment I'm just not confident is going to be coming in the way that the government is promising.
How would you fund it? How would you fund it? You're calling for things which will require more money.
At the end of the day, it's the government's decisions that they made in autumn in the budget that was the problem, and that is where we're at today. And as I said earlier, we are not the government, it's the Labour Party.
You're not the government.
We've said that we will do sound fiscal planning.
Nobody believes it.
Well, we have accepted what you said and look where it's got us. So I think we've got to remember...
We're about to see. It's going to be a great day for the country
Well,
today.
as you keep telling us. But again, let's go back to the person on the street. And it was great that you focused in Leeds, but the South West is not the Midlands. And although Chris was saying the government is wanting to re-level up and take things away from the North East, if you live in the South West, that's what you've watched for the last 10 years. You look at the Manchester Mayor, the railway systems, the metro. It's been happening. It's just they keep claiming it hasn't.
Is
and
it
actually,
that
in
sense
the
for you
South West,
that outside of London means the North and the Midlands rather than the South West?
Absolutely. And I don't believe, potentially with the exception of defence, and we've welcomed the 2.5, and I welcome that because I've got a huge amount of marine autonomous businesses in my constituency.
So you're going to do really well out of it?
No, because the fish and chip shops and things like that won't see that benefit.
As the cost of living goes down and people have more money to spend, they will buy more fish and chips.
I think the other point just to make is it's the smaller pots of cash that we need to see. Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund that the government froze. Those are the things that make a real impact to people, and they are what I am pushing for, because ultimately, big vision, fine, the government can boast as much as it likes, but what's it going to mean tomorrow morning for the residents in my constituency?
That line-by-line thing in the coming weeks and months is going to be fascinating.
It may take really a bit of time to unpick some of this stuff, including on the individual train lines, for example. You know, this budget, then we're going to have an infrastructure strategy, and then will Network Rail publish a list of the lines. It may take some time to unpick the consequences of the decisions we're about to get.
We can see the House of Commons, by the way, which is now pretty much full. We will be heading there for Prime Minister's questions very shortly. And Chris, it's a bit of a sideshow today, isn't it, Prime Minister's questions? But it's still the Prime Minister having to not answer questions about the spending review, and Kemi Badenoch probably talking about something completely different.
You know, I suppose for both sides, for Kemi Badenoch and for the Prime Minister, and indeed for the Liberal Democrats and others, they've got to go through the whole ritual of preparing and all the rest of it, but it just doesn't carry as far, does it? Because it's not the set-piece moment of the week this week. It's not even the set-piece moment of this lunchtime. So it's sort of as the Prime Minister and Kemi Badenoch and the others doing the warm-up act. Before we hear from Rachel Reeves at what about 12:35, probably?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose Kemi Badenoch might talk about the going back on the winter fuel payment again, because it's been an embarrassing moment for the government, hasn't it? Do you think?
Yes, it has, I think. I mean, they make the argument that last summer they had no option. And then I remember looking into the whites of the eyes of people in the Treasury last summer, and they were genuinely really worried about their inheritance. Now, whether that was a reasonable fear to have is an open question, but the fear was real. So they felt that they had to act, but we have had this sort of slow motion U-turn completed the other day with the actual detail, which has been, has clearly been awkward for them, no doubt.
I think the Prime Minister is about to get to his feet. We have the Speaker there. Oh, hang on.
Question 1.
Mr. Speaker, can I first wish you a happy birthday for yesterday and say that we're all delighted that Sir Billy Boston, a great British sporting icon, has received his richly deserved knighthood. Long overdue, if I may say, for him, but also for rugby league. Mr. Speaker, it's Carers Week, and I know the whole House will join me in celebrating the selfless dedication of our unpaid and young carers. This weekend also marks the 8th anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire. We will honour the 72 men, women and children who lost their lives by delivering meaningful and lasting change, a country with safe and secure homes for everyone, and where justice is done for the Grenfell community. Mr. Speaker, acting alongside our allies, we've sanctioned individuals responsible for inciting appalling settler violence and expansion. We've done that to uphold human rights and defend the prospect of a two-state solution. We will continue to support all efforts to secure a ceasefire, the release of all hostages despicably held by Hamas, and the humanitarian aid that needs to surge in. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Davis. Diolch, Mr Llefarydd. My constituent, Mr Michael O'Leary, was brutally murdered 5 years ago and his body was desecrated. Working alongside the honourable members for York Outer and Montgomeryshire and Glyndŵr, I've made a number of requests to discuss his and other victims' cases with ministers and to explore introducing legislation making the desecration of a body a criminal offence. Would the Prime Minister meet with Mr O'Leary's family, along with other victims' families, including April Jones of Machynlleth and Sarah Everard and Helen McCourt, to hear why they are calling for a new criminal offence of desecrating a body to be introduced.
Well, can I thank her for raising this horrific case and the other similar cases? And my thoughts, and I'm sure the thoughts of the whole House, are with Michael's family and all those affected by such vile crimes. I think we all need to listen to what they have to say. I know she's been working with the Honourable Friend for York Outer on this issue, and I pay tribute to her and all of those that are working so hard on this issue. And I'm sure the Justice Minister will be in touch at the first opportunity to take this forward. And I thank her again for raising a really important issue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, in Gloucestershire, after 14 years, waiting lists for both physical and mental health are finally falling. So last week I hosted a round table with young people and heard how music and arts programmes like the fantastic Gloucestershire Music Works are transforming mental health outcomes. I also chaired a panel on comedy on prescription in South by Southwest with Lou Jackson and Jonathan Pye, utilising laughter to improve well-being and reduce waiting lists. So can I ask the Prime Minister to back our campaign in creative health and urge him to go further in reducing waiting lists for all patients? Thank you.
Can I comment? He's got great expertise. He's worked for many years in the NHS as a GP, and I support the work that he's doing. Our plan for change has cut waiting lists, as he points out, by almost 5,000 in his local trust, and we're going further, including through state-of-the-art radiotherapy machines rolled out across the country, Mr. Speaker. There's one going into his constituency, more scanners going to 27 other hospital trusts, including 2 hospitals in the constituency of the Leader of the Opposition. All made possible by the decisions that we've made, and I know she'll want to stand up and welcome that.
Leave the opposition, Kemi Bernal.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the Prime Minister knows something I don't know. There's only one hospital in my constituency. But Mr. Speaker, since Labour took office, Mr. Speaker, inflation has nearly doubled, growth has halved, and unemployment has surged. Is this what the Prime Minister meant when he tweeted that the economy is improving?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, since the general election, 500,000 more people are in work. And I know she doesn't mention that. She's fixated on talking Britain down. We're investing in the future. Mr. Speaker, even in the last 2 weeks, the Strategic Defence Review, 30,000 new jobs building submarines. Yesterday, the Sizewell announcement, 10,000 new jobs. Tens of thousands of construction jobs building the social and affordable housing that was announced this morning. That's the difference that Labour makes in government.
Mr. Speaker, he must be talking about a different economy. All of us in this House heard about unemployment increasing. Unemployment has increased every month since Labour took office. Last year, he said he was taking the winter fuel payment away to balance the books. But the books are not balanced. In fact, they are worse. This year, the deficit is forecast to be £10 billion higher since the budget. Not since last year's election, since the budget. In what way are the books now balanced?
Mr. Speaker, she's obviously missed the interest rate cuts, the growth figures for earlier this year, the huge, the Strategic Defence Review, local transport, £15 billion going in, free school meals, Sizewell, social housing. Mr. Speaker, but she stands there to lecture us, and I say Liz Truss is obviously back in vogue, advising reform officially now, haunting the Tories, and I remind her that the Shadow Home Secretary, I think he was then Chief Secretary to the Treasury, he gave the Liz Truss budget, Mr. Speaker, 9.5 out of 10. The Leader of the Opposition said what was wrong with Liz Truss's budget was not necessarily the package, that was all right, it was the way it was sold. They've learned absolutely nothing.
Mr. Speaker, he loves talking about Liz Truss because he loves talking about Liz Truss. Why? because he wants to hide from his own economic record. He's a coward. He's a coward. Every time he stands up there and talks about Liz Truss, it's because he is scared about talking about his record and what is happening to the economy out there. Let's bring it back to the U-turn, which he's running away from. A U-turn on a policy that his MPs went out defending time and time again. Let's go through what's happening here. 1 minute, they said it was right to take the winter fuel payment away, that there might be a run on the pound. The next minute, they said it was right to give it back. This is laughable. He stands there all puffed up and self-righteous. Why can't the Prime Minister just admit that he made a mistake?
Mr. Speaker, they left a £22 billion black hole that we had to fill, and that's why we took the right decisions. We've stabilised the economy. That's why we've seen 4 interest rate cuts. The triple lock is committed to on this side. They say it's unsustainable on that side. That's £470 for most pensioners and good Q1 growth. 3 weeks ago, I said that I wanted more pensioners to be eligible for winter fuel. I'm really pleased we set out the threshold and the certainty that is needed. And she says I don't want to talk about my record. What about 3 trade deals, record investment, free school meals, breakfast clubs, social and affordable housing, defence review, Sizewell? We could go on all morning, Mr. Speaker, but we've got the Chancellor who's going to say even more in a minute. Mr. Speaker, I think she at the weekend said that she would be getting better in the role. She could start with apologising for the Liz Truss budget. That would be better.
Mr. Speaker, I get better every week. He gets worse. Yes, he gets worse. Last week, Mr. Speaker.
If you think that is a good look, it is a very bad look. And think twice before you try to shout somebody down in that way.
Mr. Speaker, last week he had to get his lines from the Russian embassy. I think we all know that he is getting worse, and what he does not want to talk about is how he is going to make the economy better. That is what the people out there want to hear, and he's got no answers. His trade deals have unravelled. The Strategic Defence Review, everyone out there is asking where's the money coming from, and the fact is he doesn't know how to balance the books. The Chancellor says the winter fuel payment U-turn won't be funded through higher borrowing. So will the Prime Minister admit that it will be funded by putting everybody's taxes up?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think she let slip on the Matt Ford programme the other day that she rehearses her fury for PMQ. So a very good rehearsal this morning, I think. Mr. Speaker, she asked what we're doing. At the budget, we put record investment in our NHS and our public service. Record investment. And she comes every week to carp on about national insurance, but she doesn't stand there with the courage of her convictions and say she'll actually reverse it. And the reason she won't, because she won't stand up and say she's against the investment in the NHS. She won't stand up and say she's against the investment in our public services. And we'll all listen very carefully in just 20 minutes when the Chancellor lays out more record investment as to whether they welcome it or whether they say they wouldn't support it.
Mr. Speaker, every week I come here to tell him the truth. The truth that the economy is in a spiral because Labour, that's all of them, Labour put up taxes that cut growth. And we all heard the Prime Minister, he didn't rule out tax rises, so they are going to have to put up taxes even more. This is a spiral. And if that wasn't bad enough, Mr. Speaker, if that wasn't bad enough, this morning we heard that because of his terrible Chagos deal, Mauritius is scrapping income tax. Why on earth should the British taxpayer pay for £30 billion for tax cuts in Mauritius?
Mr. Speaker, Diego Garcia is a vital intelligence and strategic capability. And it's absolutely clear that legal uncertainty would compromise it in very short order. That is why they started the negotiations in relation to it. And no responsible Prime Minister would let that happen. We've secured the base for the long time. That has been welcomed by our allies, by the US, by NATO, by Australia, New Zealand, India. It's been opposed by our adversaries, Russia, China and Iran. And in the second column, we add reform, following Putin, and the Tories following reform.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows this has nothing to do with national security, but his bad negotiating. I've had the security briefings. It was a bad deal before, and it's still a bad deal. And then in half an hour, the Chancellor is going to stand up and tell us that everything is fine. But the truth is, she has made bad choices. Bad choices that mean higher inflation, bad choices that have led to lower growth, bad choices that have meant that jobs have been lost every single month since Labour came into office. That's hundreds of thousands of families who've lost their income in Stoke, in Grangemouth, in Luton. Those are their constituencies, businesses across the country. The Chancellor has lost all her headroom. She's fallen out with the Cabinet. She's making unfunded spending commitments, which she promised not to do. Isn't the truth that we have got the wrong Chancellor and the wrong priorities?
The wrong choice they made was making her Leader of the Opposition.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and belated birthday greetings to you. Mr. Speaker, it's wrong for any Labour government. No Labour government should ever try to balance the books on the backs of disabled people. Yet in just a few weeks' time, that is what the Prime Minister will ask this House to do. Many of us will not be able to go along with that because it will mean that people who need assistance to cut up their food, to wash themselves, to dress themselves and to go to the toilet will lose the PIP they currently get. That's vital support. This week, the Prime Minister changed direction on winter fuel payment. Will he do the same in relation to this and now drop these disability benefit cuts?
Mr. Speaker, it's very important we make the changes to our welfare system. It's not working. It needs reform. I think everybody agrees with that. It doesn't work for anyone. We will do so on a principled basis that those who can work should work. Those that want to work should be supported to do so, and that we must protect those with the most severe disabilities who will never be able to work. And we're doing that by ending reassessments and paying a new premium.
With Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join others in wishing you belated happy returns for yesterday? And can I welcome the government's sanctions of ministers in the Netanyahu government, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich? The violence they've incited, the settler violence they've incited against innocent Palestinians on the West Bank is intolerable, and the government were right to act. And as it's Carers Week, Mr. Speaker, can I pay tribute to the millions of unpaid family carers across the country and recognise the challenges that they face? Mr. Speaker, the last Conservative government left our health service on its knees. We've heard reports that the NHS will get extra funding in the spending review. If it does, we will support that. But does the Prime Minister agree that no amount of money for the NHS will solve its crisis unless we also invest to fix care? So without preempting the Chancellor's statement, will the Prime Minister reassure me that both social care and family carers will get the priority they deserve in the spending review?
Can I agree with him that the health crisis created by the previous government cannot be solved? They groan. That is exactly how the country feels about the last 14 years and the mess they made of everything. Yes, we do need to fix social care alongside the money that we're putting into the NHS. We're putting record amounts into the NHS. That's the right thing to do, and we're seeing the results. We promised 2 million extra appointments in the first year, of a Labour government. We've delivered 3 million, so there will be that extra funding. I would gently say to him, whilst he welcomes all the extra funding, he can't also at the same time simply say he's against any way of raising the money for the funding. There's an incompatibility there.
Sir Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows he's got a fairer and better way of funding NHS investment, and I regret the fact that he didn't answer my question on care. But, Mr. Speaker, moving on, the Prime Minister is right to increase defence spending, and later we'll hear the difficult choices the Chancellor has had to make, partly to fund that defence expenditure. But there are £25 billion of frozen Russian assets in the UK right now. Billions that could be used to stop Putin's war machine and to boost Britain's defence industry even faster. So at the G7 this weekend, will the Prime Minister try to seek an agreement to seize those frozen Russian state assets and use them to support Ukraine?
Well, as he knows, that is an issue that's being considered, but it is complicated, and there are a lot of countervailing factors that need to be carefully balanced in a decision that can be made. We are talking to allies about it, but I don't want to pretend to the House that there's an easy answer on this, because there isn't.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More jobs, cheaper bills. That was our promise on net zero. If we can't meet those goals, then we must consider our approach. In Pembrokeshire, we have a proud industrial history rooted in oil and gas, and an incredibly exciting opportunity in floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea. So can the Prime Minister assure me that he is committed to a just transition that protects and creates jobs?
Well, I thank him for raising this. I believe this government must seize the opportunities of net zero for working people, creating good skilled jobs, taking off the roller coaster of volatile fossil fuel markets. Under past governments, Mr. Speaker, hard-working communities had their pride and their jobs ripped away, and we will never do that in relation to a transition. We've already seen £40 billion of investment in energy and renewables, and the CBI shows that 38,000 jobs in Wales are linked to clean energy. I want to see more of that. Both of them are against it.
Saoirse Eastwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, I just want to pay tribute to the Police Service of Northern Ireland briefly for tackling public order in Northern Ireland over the last 2 nights with over 30 police officers injured. I'm sure the whole House would want to join with me in that, and also condemning the racist violence. Mr. Speaker, whether it's the cardiac scandal at the RVH in Belfast, the cervical smear scandal in the Southern Trust, the COVID-bereaved families, or the crash of Chinook Zulu Delta 576, all of which has impacted my constituents in Lagan Valley. The common thread here is that families simply wanted the truth, but they were let down by institutions at every cut and turn. Will this government urgently introduce a duty of candour bill and ensure that it reflects what the Hillsborough Law Now campaigners and families have fought so very hard for?
Can I start with the important point she makes about Ballymena? And I utterly condemn the violence that we've seen overnight in Ballymena and in other parts of Northern Ireland, including against PSNI officers. It is absolutely vital that the PSNI are given the time they need to investigate the incidents concerned, rather than face mindless attacks as they seek to bring peace and order to keep people safe. And the Northern Ireland Secretary is in touch with the PSNI and the Executive, and I'm being kept updated in relation to that. In relation to the tragic cases that she raises, firstly, I thank her for raising them, and it is important that we have a legal duty of candour. We will be introducing that because, as she says, there must be the truth here based on all people being dealt with on the basis of dignity, fairness and accountability. Thank you.
Yasmin Qureshi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the words of the former Israeli Prime Minister, what we are witnessing in Gaza is indiscriminate, limitless, cruel and criminal killing of civilians. More than 50,000 people have been killed. Children have been shot while queuing for bread. A growing number of genocide scholars, including leading Israeli academics, believe that a genocide is taking place. Under international law, we have a duty to prevent genocide. I served on the UN mission in Kosovo. We acted to stop mass killing there. What is the difference now? Will the Prime Minister please intervene immediately to alleviate human suffering and take steps to recognise the state of Palestine?
Mr. Speaker, she'll have seen the statement we made yesterday and the actions that we're taking with allies. The humanitarian situation is dreadful and distressing, and scenes that we've witnessed outside aid distribution centres are frankly heartbreaking. More aid is needed at volume and speed into Gaza, and Israel's plan for aid delivery is inadequate and insufficient. What is needed is for the UN and other agencies to deliver that aid according to well-established mechanisms. And Israel must allow this. Mr. Speaker, we are working with allies to do all that we can to make this happen, as well, of course, to get the hostages out who have been held for a very long time and a desperately needed return to a ceasefire.
Alex Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, there are significant concerns regarding the potential job losses at Spirit Aerosystems stemming from the deal with Airbus. Would the Prime Minister agree with me and intervene to bring all the main players, including the unions, the Business Secretary and the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, around the table to ensure these jobs are protected, especially considering the scale of the issues akin to the challenges faced by British Steel? And also, there is an issue for Northern Ireland businesses with the outworkings of the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Winter Framework. Can the Prime Minister give me reassurances that he's working to resolve all those issues?
Well, I'm grateful to him for raising this important case of Spirit Aerosystems in Northern Ireland. I know how important it is for the workforce. I've visited them myself on more than one occasion. Airbus's decision to expand UK operations is good news for the sector and testament to world-class manufacturing expertise, and I want to see those high-skilled jobs protected. The Northern Ireland Secretary has met Airbus, the trade unions and assembly representatives to discuss the best outcome. The Minister of Industry is continuing engagement with stakeholders, and we will do everything we can in relation to this situation. I'm grateful to him for raising it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister join me in condemning decisions taken by the Transport Minister of the previous government, who turned their back on promises to deliver a new train station at Bean Park, which derailed growth in my constituency of Dagenham and Rainham? And will he also agree that the Grampian condition on the Bean Park development must be honoured and that infrastructure must accompany all developments of scale as we get on with the job of delivering millions of new homes?
Well, I know she's been fighting hard for this project for years, and she's right, the previous government failed to deliver. You could say that about anything they touch, Mr. Speaker. But the Rail Minister is working with the Mayor and Housing Minister to get an appropriate solution to unlock housing in the area. Mr. Speaker, we'll also bring C2C back into public ownership, improving reliability and performance and ensuring every penny is focused on better service. I imagine when I said disaster is referring to the last government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've spoken with parents with children with special educational needs and disabilities, but aren't getting the support they need in school. However, if as a result their child is out of school, they're left facing prosecution, fines, or even prison time. Punishing parents for the failings of a broken system is outrageous. So will the Prime Minister end this by backing Lord's Amendment 349A to the Children's Wellbeing and School Bill, and will he meet with me to discuss this further?
Can I thank her for raising this? The epidemic of absence in our schools is something that really does worry me and concern me. Thanks to the efforts of schools and parents across the country, we've seen over 3 million more days in school this year compared to last, which is really important. But we do know that pupils with special educational needs face more complex barriers in relation to school attendance. Look, we will, of course, look at all amendments in the usual way, but in this instance, I do think we struck the right balance.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I start by congratulating Sir Billy Boston. Billy ended his career playing at Blackpool, and I know this has been a long campaign by the Culture Secretary, the Speaker, the Honourable Member for Makerfield, and many in this House, so congratulations to Sir Billy. 12,000 people, it's been exposed by shelter, are waiting for council housing in Blackpool. This is a damning indictment on the legacy of previous 14 years of the government. Hundreds of families in my constituency are waiting for housing, stuck in bed and breakfast, or like my constituent Casey, who's sofa surfing with her 2 children in tow. So will the Prime Minister, alongside the Deputy Prime Minister, commit to a new generation of social housing and council housing in my constituency and help me build a better Blackpool?
Well, can I join him on his comments about Billy Boston, and I think the whole House will, Mr. Speaker. We are turning the tide on the housing crisis with the biggest investment in social and affordable housing in a generation, Mr. Speaker. Chancellor investing £39 billion over the next 10 years, almost double what we saw under the last government. And no wonder the National Housing Federation welcomed this as transformative, saying it offers real hope to the thousands who need safe, secure and affordable homes.
It is National Diabetes Week, and as someone living with type 1, as we both are, Mr. Speaker, we are more than aware of the serious complications of diabetic ketoacidosis, KDA, which, if not caught early enough, could prove fatal. Now, a quarter of children are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when in KDA, and that could be avoided with early diagnosis. So will the Prime Minister commit to rolling out a national, universal screening programme, as seen in Italy, for type 1?
Can I thank her for championing this really important issue? My late mother had diabetes, and so I know firsthand just what a struggle it can be and how important it is. Type 1 diabetes is not preventable, as she knows, but the sooner we can reach people, the sooner we can care for them. And we have a screening programme in the UK available to families across the country, and over 20,000 children have already taken part. It is really important that we continue to deliver that, but can I thank her for continuing to champion this and to raise her voice on this very important issue.
Durham Pappy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is crystal clear how social media and smartphones are harming our young people, with cyberbullying, addiction and exploitation absolutely rife. Governments elsewhere are taking bold action. I understand ministers are considering a 2-hour limit, but that's per app rather than per day. I know the Prime Minister takes this seriously, so can he update the House on what he wants to see happen and what action this government will take to protect our children?
It is important that we take action to protect our children, and from July, Mr. Speaker, tough new rules will mean platforms must protect children in the UK from seeing harmful and violent content. We do need to look at other measures needed to create safer online experiences for young people, and we won't hesitate to take further steps.
Speaker, concerning EU statistics showed that delays for cancer treatment in North Norfolk are greater than the national average. Much of this relates to the struggles that we face specifically as an older rural constituency. I was elected on a promise to get our NHS back and fighting fit after the criminal damage inflicted on it by the Conservatives. Would the Prime Minister recognise that rural health services face acute and specific challenges? And can he give his word to the people of North Norfolk that the reforms and spending we need will come forward to address this?
Can I thank him for raising this really important issue for his constituents? I think it does impact rural areas in particular. We've set out record funding for the NHS. We have our cancer plan, and I can give him that reassurance.
This is the final question, John Erie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister and members across this House would have witnessed this spectacular victory for Davy Russell in Scotland. Hall and Stonehouse by-election. My constituents are sick of SNP failure, and they voted for change for their NHS, their schools and for Scotland. So can I ask the Prime Minister, has he seen the calls from within the SNP for John Swinney to resign? And does he agree with me that a leader who has only ever lost elections to the Labour Party should stay put?
Well, can I pay tribute to her for the role that she and others played in seeing Davy Russell elected? He will be a dedicated champion for her constituents. And after nearly 2 decades in power, the SNP got their verdict last Thursday. Scotland wants change, and they know the SNP are completely out of ideas. That's why they want a Labour government to deliver real change.
Right, that completes Prime Minister's questions.
So that's the end of Prime Minister's questions today. Very much the second show in town, because here is Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, with her spending review.